The chronic stressor trap. Why STEM high achiever burnout is a systems problem, not a people problem. Hey there. You are in the right place, and this video is for you. If you are a high achieving STEM professional, or if you are a manager or leader of high achievers. And today I want to talk about one of the things that drives me crazy as we talk about burnout. So I'm coming from the background of I'm an engineer, I'm a parent, I have been a leader both in organizations before I owned my own business. I started my own business. I have also led volunteer organizations. And when we talk about burnout, one of the things that we often miss is the systemic piece of this, that we talk about mindfulness and individuals needing to develop more resilience, stress management skills, and all that is absolutely needed. And we often miss the idea that some of the stressors in the world, the external things that happen, are predictable on a firm level, and we can address those as well to minimize the amount of burnout that we see and the amount that the individuals need to do to be able to address it. So today, that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. If you have tried all the individual solutions to mindfulness and exercise and movement, and you're done attending all the different educational things out there about stress management tools and how you can do that. You've done all of that and you're like, there is a piece missing here. You're in the right place. Let's talk about it. The data tells us that burnout is a systemic problem. 76%, according to a Gallup survey of employees, experience burnout on the job at least some time. In 2025, 66% of all U.S. workers were experiencing burnout, with the highest rates being among 18 to 24-year-olds, 25 to 34-year-olds, and the 55 plus age group. And it's not just individual contributors or folks in these age groups that are experiencing burnout. There is a manager burnout epidemic. Here's some headlines that we have seen again in 2025 around managers quitting because they're not feeling resourced in the way they need to be. I like this one particular headline that illustrates the point that 2025 is set to bring out a manager crash round lack of support. Now, there are gender differences here. So a lot of my work is in helping to retain women within STEM organizations, and women are more likely to be both highly engaged and experienced burnout. But I want you to notice, this is true, and it's not like men in the organizations are not experiencing this as well. Women are just experiencing it at a higher rate. And they're industry hotspots as well. And so there was a cross-industry study of the state of workplace burnout, again in 2025, and what they found was some hot spots that are relevant to STEM professionals include the tech industry, construction and real estate, and healthcare, and that includes nurses. Okay, so we know burnout is an epidemic across the industry, no matter what age group you are in. So let's start talking about how we address this. And to talk about this, we have to talk about stress. Now, there has been research, and some of the research I'm going to reference is from this awesome book, Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. That was written by the Nagasaki sisters, one of which is a doctor. And what they talk about is the fact that to resolve stress, you have to address two different things. First, the internal stress piece of this, so the individual, how you are experiencing this in your body, and also the external stressors. Now, let me illustrate the difference between the internal stress and the external stress with a story from my own life. So it was around 5 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon in March earlier this year when I looked outside to see that my neighbor's large garage was on fire. Now, this garage was a garage where they were working on multiple cars, so it was large. It was not your standard kind of 1 or 2 car garage size. Now, the only thing standing between my house and that garage were some woods. We were on a wildfire advisory that week. And so I grabbed the kids, we hopped in the car, we drove to a place that we knew would be safe. because if those woods were to catch fire, our house would likely go up in flames. So I remember rushing out of the door, my heart pumping, adrenaline flooding my system as I jumped into action to escape that scene. Now, good news, the fire was eventually put out. My house was unscathed, no one was hurt. But when we returned to our house that night, and we could even see, so we had a visual on this, we could see that the fire was out and the danger was gone. I struggled to go to sleep. My kiddos also struggled to go to sleep. And so my heart rate, it was up all night long. I wear an Oura ring so I can track this kind of thing. And I woke up in the middle of the night. I would look out the window to see, like, is it still safe? I would be listening for crackling sounds or sirens or things that would indicate there was a fire. And even though my logical brain knew looking out the window that the stress was over, and to be clear, the photo you're looking at in this picture was a photo from our local fire company in the aftermath of this. Even though the fire was gone, my body didn't know that. And it didn't know it to the extent that there were, actual physical consequences I could notice, like not being able to sleep that night. Now, it wasn't until the next day when some friends reached out, I had shared what had happened, they expressed relief that we were safe, and I started to feel a little bit calmer. And it wasn't until 2 days after that, after a long walk, some extra self-care time, some meditation time, forcing myself to relax, and also reconnecting with my spouse who had actually been away on a work trip that week, that my body finally got the message, and the internal measures like heart rate, breathing rate, went back to normal. So, while this is an extreme case, that fire, that external stressor that I experienced lingered in my body, in this case for days afterwards, until it was resolved internally. Now, at work, we have the same thing going on. To your body, being yelled at work or stressed over a deadline triggers that same ancient alarm system that is part of human physiology as my experience with that fire in my neighbor's garage. Our brains, we literally cannot tell the difference between a harsh criticism and a physical threat. The same kinds of things happen in our body. The racing heart, the muscle tension, the instinct to run away, that flood of stress hormones. And this is just human physiology, the system that has kept us alive for millions of years. We all have this response. The challenge is that at work, we can't physically run away in many cases, like I could from the fire situation. We have to sit there, stay professional, smile, get along with our colleagues so we can get our work done. Meanwhile, our bodies are often screaming danger. And so this distinction of stressors like the fire, angry colleague, tight deadline, email overload, maybe even a micromanaging boss, and the stress that it causes, the things like the racing thoughts, the tense shoulders, the pounding heart, the faster breathing, the churning stomach, cortisol, which is a stress hormone, flooding our system. These are two different things, and dealing with one does not mean that you've dealt with the other. As in my example, even when the stressor of the fire was gone, I was still experiencing the stress in my body for days afterwards. And here's the thing about the discussion on burnout. Often, I am seeing an overfocus on stress at the individual, the internal level, and an underfocus on dealing with the stressors from the external world. Now, you've likely heard many times before different ways that you can deal with the individual stress yourself. And typically this falls into two buckets. Stress management, so things like physical movement, mindfulness activities, social connections, creative outlets, and laughing. And indeed, these are some of the things that really helped me when I was in this situation with trying to resolve the stress that was in my body from this fire. The other piece of this is typically mindset-based. So busting mental barriers or old stories that increase stress, practicing growth resilient habits, professional support like therapy, coaching. Mindset work is a very large part of work I do when clients work with me as a leadership coach. But the challenge here is that, again, both of these things, the internal stress piece and the external stressors piece, have to be addressed if we're talking about burnout and overwork. And this is literally a math doesn't math issue here, that if all we focus on is up-leveling our own individual resilience and stress management techniques, if that's all we focus on and we ignore dealing with the external stressors, we are still going to end up in a place of burnout. Now, I want to put before you today that when we look at industry trends, we can actually find that external stressor causes, when it comes to work, are actually fairly predictable and systemic, in that they are industry-wide. So that's what I mean by systemic. So we can see them across industries, and we can generally predict the categories of these things and what's going to happen. Now, the good news here is that if, in fact, those external stressors are predictable and systemic challenges, that means we are in a spot to do something about them as long as we plan ahead. That also means, again, if they're systemic across the industry, that means that we can learn from others who have overcome them. So I want to give you some specific categories of these, because I know it is super tempting to say, well, things going on outside of me, I have no agency over dealing with any of these things. There's no way I can address these external stressors. And so I want to give you some examples of the categories here. So there are some things that you and the organization you're working for cannot control. These are things like the accelerated pace of change, industry trends, workforce demographic challenges, and systemic inequities. That is outside you. You can't control it. However, how we respond to some of these things, we can absolutely control. And so those types of things include how we show up and respond, business decisions, like how we select clients and how we work with clients, where firms decide to invest their resources, and how the organization, the team, invests in you as the individual and within the organization to adapt, learn, and grow. So let me first talk about what are the trends related to the things that organizations cannot control. Because again, I'm setting up for you this idea that the things out there, yes, we don't know the exact thing that's going to happen next, but the trend of what's going on out there, more uncertainty, faster deadlines, more people needing to do more with less, those trends are there, they're not going away, and they are absolutely predictable. And so when we talk about the pace of change, that is accelerating. It's not in your head. It's not that you are struggling to deal with this. It's that everybody is. And again, we have data that shows this. What you're looking at is called the Toffler curve. You can Google that if you'd like. That's basically saying the pace of change has now gone vertical, and they've even given a name called VUCA. So VUCA stands for volatile, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it's basically a fancy way of saying the pace of change has accelerated. And the folks that track this, so this was a Pulse of Change Index from 2024 by Accenture. What they found was that since 2019, so they did this from 2019 to 2024. I don't have 2025 data yet. They found that the pace of change had accelerated 183% total, and just last year, 33%. Okay. So that's kind of the global thing, but I know what some of you might be thinking. You're like, how does this exactly apply to my industry? And so I am going to, I want to pluck out one industry as an example within STEM. So my background is in structural engineering. I know structural engineering really well. And so that is the industry I'm going to grab onto, the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. And so it's likely, even if you are not in this particular STEM industry, you can find very, very similar detailed data about your particular industry that will make the case that, again, this idea of doing more with less, clients maybe being less educated and you have to educate them more, The external stressors that lead to burnout, we know what they are. They are there. And so I will also talk about what we can do about this. Okay, but first, let's go back to the data around what is going on out there. So, projected construction demand by 2040 is expected to increase by 9 trillion in US dollar amount. And if you exclude China from that, because some folks are like, okay, well, how much is this from the developing worlds or countries and how much is this from other places? We're looking at a $5 trillion investment increase. So at the same time, there are workforce challenges across the board. So within the AEC industry, there are different client types, but at the end of the day, we all need contractors to be able to build things. So that group has a workforce challenge. 1 in 5 US construction workers are 55 plus. There's an additional 500,000 US construction workers needed to just meet current demand now. This is expected to get worse before it gets better. And so we need contractors. Contractors are some of our clients. The architecture workforce also has its challenges. The majority of the a large majority of the workforce, and definitely a large majority of the owners in of the architecture client groups are 35% are over 55 years old, 24% are 45 to 54 years old, 22% is 35 to 44, and then 19% are under 25. 51% in the civil engineering area. And so civil engineering typically covers structural, it could cover water, transportation, a lot of the things around infrastructure, so energy as well. 51% of firms actually turned down work last year, so this 2024, due to workforce shortages. And there was one study that even found that civil engineering student enrollments are dropping. So the American Society of Engineering Education, there was a conference session where one of the presenters shared that there had been a 40% drop since 2018 of civil engineering college student enrollments. I looked into this a little bit, and it's actually undergrad, grad together. So some of it could be funding for graduate student programs as well. Regardless, this idea that, oh, at some point the folks graduating from college, there'll be enough of them to fill the workforce shortage issues is probably nothing more than a pipe dream. And so when we look at all these trends taken together, we have not enough people, especially people with experience, to meet the demand for workers at the price we're willing to pay for them. There is an increased pace of change, which tends to mean shorter deadlines, tighter budgets. This trend has been accelerating definitely since I started my career. This is not going away anytime soon. It also means that on the retention side of the equation, which is my specialty when working with individuals and organizations, we cannot afford to lose people, especially in mid-career. Yet this is exactly what is happening. So there's a lot of data up on this screen. This data is very specific to structural engineers, and I believe in attribution. This is coming from the NCSEA's SE3 Committee 2020 survey. You can find this online if you were to Google SE3 Committee publications. And when they asked, have you considered leaving? Notice more than 55% of, and like I said, this is structural engineers. I would expect this data to translate to a lot of other engineering professions as well. More than 55% of all respondents said, yes, I have considered leaving. And that number is higher if you are a woman, if you are Latinx, Asian, Middle Eastern, Black. It doesn't matter. Whatever, however you identify, the majority has considered leaving. And again, that number is higher if you are a woman or if you are a racial ethnic minority. And lest you say, oh, well, maybe that's because the younger generations, they're just not as ambitious. I'm going to call BS on that right now. because even the most ambitious have considered leaving. So this was some data, I think it was from 2018, from Zweig Group, and they found 100% of AEC principals who identified as women and only 49% of men had considered leaving the industry. This was the first time they checked out this data. I do believe there is some updated data that the 100% number has gone down very, very slightly. But I wanted to share this statistic with you because this myth that, oh, well, burnout doesn't happen if you are super ambitious or are a very high achieving person and can just push through. Again, I'm calling BS on this. And it's particularly challenging for the folks in what I call the murky middle. So the people in mid-career, the experienced people that we need to not burn out because they are the next generation of leaders, are also the least satisfied with work-life balance. So the owners, the people in charge, and the people at entry level are the most satisfied with work-life balance, generally speaking. Again, this is structural engineering specific data. And the people in the middle who tend to have a lot of responsibility, but may not have the authority or the autonomy to get things done are the most frustrated. And I will say on this slide specifically, so yes, this is structural engineering data. I do a lot of work with folks at the project manager level who are right in the middle of this and across industries. So within tech, within structural engineering, mechanical engineering, biomedical fields, all of those industries, civil, all of them, this is a problem. And this is something that I have seen, even if you struggle to find specific data for your industry, that these folks in the middle are the most at risk for burnout. Now, it's also true that one of the factors within burnout can be unfair treatment at work. And so I wanted to share a little bit of data with you around gender issues. Why? Because I feel like in some circles there's this misnomer that it is 2025, gender issues have just gone away in the world as there have been more diverse peoples coming into engineering. And that's, in fact, not the case when we look at data. And so this is from a Pew Research Center study that found women in STEM jobs, 50% of them reported some type of gender-based discrimination. I'm going to come back to structural engineering specifically here, because when they looked at this, what they found was that white females like myself, 19.1 relative to, so 19.1 times versus the white male. The odds of that are 1. That was they set that as the baseline relative to odds of discrimination and harassment by race and gender. And so you can see that nearly no one is immune from possible unfair treatment at work. If you're wondering how this shows up, you can see this on the screen in terms of, what did the women report in terms of unfair treatment? What did the men report? Non-white women, non-white men, who was doing this behavior? Where was the location of this? And here's the interesting thing about this. So this is an industry that a lot of people are out on construction sites. So maybe you would think to yourself, oh, well, they're just experiencing harassment, discrimination, unfair treatment out on the construction sites that typically, and still is today, tends to be more male dominated. You would find that's actually not the case. Most of this is happening in an office. And so again, I'm sharing this with you because I want to build for you the case that there are systemic issues that lead to burnout that have nothing to do with your individual, how you show up at work, nothing to do with how you may feel that burnout is typically presented as, oh, well, there's something wrong with me. I'm just not tough enough. And what we find, so this is from Gallup 2020 research, They found the top 5 stressors correlating with burnout was number 1, unfair treatment at work. I just talked about that. 2, unmanageable workload. 3, unclear communication, especially from managers. 4, lack of manager support. And 5, unreasonable time pressure. And yes, that is in order of the things they found most likely to correlate with burnout at work. Now, I want to put this all together because all these trends create predictable outcomes. If you put them all together, what this means is you are likely to have staffing shortages. And staffing shortages can either be less people or less experienced people than you need to complete the work. So what we are finding is that there is often a gap in organizations in terms of a large amount of the organizations are often top heavy with super experienced folks, the executives, the vice presidents, the people who maybe founded the company in small and medium-sized firms. There are a fair amount of folks that are entry level or, less than 5 years of experience. And then there's often not the folks in the middle. The folks that I shared a moment ago have the work, are often going to be most challenged with work-life balance. There are not enough of those folks to go around. And so, again, this leads to staffing shortages. The trends tell us that we have compressed deadlines. Our clients aren't saying, oh, take your time on delivering that project, especially in an age where there's a lot of economic uncertainty as to the cost of goods. Deadlines are getting compressed more and more. We have communication overload. Lots of people are getting too many emails. If you've noticed that maybe it takes a couple more emails to even get a response, that is not in your head. We have either too much communication, or for some folks, they're so overwhelmed with communication that the only way to actually get anything from them is to talk to them directly in a meeting or in a phone call or in a message. Again, this is all communication overload. Again, this is a trend that has been getting worse and worse, and we can't expect it to go away or magically get better on its own. Simultaneously, another trend here is the client education burden. What do I mean by that? So I'm going to give the example from the AEC industry. Again, you are likely to see this in your own industry as well. And so the fact that when your clients or some of the folks you're working with, like the contractor example I gave, when there are less experienced folks, when there is a worker shortage, that often means that people are trying to find people and may end up hiring people who may not be the most qualified because that's what they can find. What that means to you as a STEM professional is you have to spend more time educating those people as to what success looks like on your project, basic things that someone with more experience would know. All of that takes time, and that leads to more communication overload. That leads to, it doesn't lead to staffing shortages, but it definitely eats up a lot of your time and can absolutely lead to burnout. And then this systemic inequities, that unfair treatment stuff that I showed a bunch of statistics on earlier. And again, it's not just gender, it's not just race, it could be age, it could just be someone who was never trained on how to manage people that is resulting in unfair treatment. And so when we take these industry reality trends, so the 5 that you're seeing up on the screen, and we start overlaying that with the top burnout stressors, unfair treatment, unmanageable workload, unclear communication, lack of manager support, unreasonable time pressure, although the 5 things that Gallup found in their study, and then we start drawing lines between what causes what. So I'll start with staffing shortages that could be connected easily to 3 of the top burnout stressors. If you start drawing lines all between those, what you find is that you have a pretty big mess pretty quickly, that these predictable industry trends of how they show up are directly linked to burnout stressors. Okay, so the point here is that the idea, and I said at the beginning of this video, that This idea that burnout is a personal failure drives me crazy. Because, yes, you as an individual have got to know how to manage your own stress. Like, that's something you absolutely have to do. But burnout is also a predictable outcome of industry conditions. It's not because you're not tough enough, too sensitive, can't handle the pressure, not resilient enough. Instead, it is because, in some cases, okay, we haven't been taught to complete the stress cycle, and that's our individual responsibility to learn how to do that. But we also have firm level issues where firms have not addressed controllable stressors. They haven't addressed what to do when these things show up. And in some cases, we've even gone so far as to say, okay, well, let's do an individual solution for a systemic problem. Let's make sure all of our employees have access to mindfulness training, yet we still make business decisions that directly lead to burnout. And so this is the thing that drives me crazy, and that I wanted to share with you today about there is a better way here. Okay, so again, fixing burnout requires organizational shifts and individual tools. And I cannot overemphasize the box of shame around this topic. Burnout is not happening because there is something wrong with you. You have been conditioned, and I have been conditioned to believe that if we are struggling, it's because we're not tough enough. It's because we're weak or we can't cut it. And that's not true. Like, objectively, if you're being asked to do the work of 3 people, if somebody left your firm and you're taking on their workload, if you're managing constant reorganizations, unclear expectations, unclear priorities, somebody saying, oh, well, we have 50 things that need to get done this week, you just figure it out, right? This is not because something is wrong with you. This is a math doesn't math problem. In fact, I would go so far to say that the current external conditions in the world mean that burnout is almost inevitable if we can't have open conversations at work and put in place systems and processes to address the external stressors. So let's talk about what you can do. And I'm going to focus a lot around systems and processes. This does not have to be hard. So I said, we have these 5 industry trends. We know how they show up. I gave you a whole bunch of data on how they show up. These manifest in known ways. So how do you know if you're dealing with one of these trends? Well, here's the question to ask at work. Ask yourself now. You can ask this of your teammates as well. Are you dealing with similar issues over and over on your projects? So as one example, are the people you're doing your projects for constantly pushing back to see if they can get more work out of you done in less time? If your answer is yes, that's not an individual issue that you should just say, oh, let's leave the individuals to figure out how to deal with this. That is a sign that the issue is a systemic chronic stressor that is best addressed at a systems, not an individual level. And here's the thing about systems thinking in this particular case. So having these systems in place protect people from having to individually fight the chronic stressors and the related stress over and over. Over time, if we leave people in our organization to fight chronic stressors by themselves, they are going to get burnt out. So what do we do instead? We create standard operating procedures, SOPs. Now, you have to create them and people have to follow them. So there are multiple steps here. But I want to give you some super simple examples of this, because I often hear from firms that, okay, if the thing we need to do to retain our people, to make sure that people are not burning out, is putting in place systems and processes, that sounds like a lot of work. And I want to challenge that, because most of us, if you think about your day-to-day job, I bet you can think of immediately one system or process or simple thing you could put in place in under an hour that would make a huge difference. And so I want to give you some examples. So let's start with staffing shortages. And so staffing shortages, things like onboarding documents, mentoring programs, training documents, specification, CAD, design standards, any kind of document around, okay, how can we get people up to speed quickly? In the case of a mentoring program, this doesn't have to be fancy. This literally can be everybody sit down in a meeting, pair people up with someone else and say, hey, sometime in the next month, I want you to have a meeting with this person, talk about how you can support them in your role, and have them talk through some of the challenges they're having. This does not have to be hard. Training documents. It's super easy at this moment in time to, if you are a senior person walking through a task, do that task on your computer, record it with one of the many technology tools out there like Zoom or Teams or Loom, talk over what you're doing, boom, training video done. You can share that with a younger person, and so that you don't have to explain the same thing over and over and over again. Let's talk about the compressed deadlines. So one thing you can do is, so shorter deadlines are becoming standard. You can create standard what we need by when documents that you provide at the beginning of every project. And here's a big one. So the explicit discussion of when and how to set boundaries and minimize scope creep with clients, contractors. This also applies to external stakeholders. And so one of the things we are seeing happening all the time is that your clients, and these clients could be internal or external, they'll call you on Friday. They say, I need this. Can you get it to me immediately? Every time that happens, that likely interrupts the important work you had already decided to do that day that you needed to get done. And so in most organizations, this ends up getting left to the individual, and the individual may feel like, oh, I'm, a bad person by not jumping and saying yes every time these kinds of requests comes up. Instead, if what you were to do is have all the managers sit down in a group and with their younger folks and say, hey, here's our new rule of thumb. If somebody asks you for something, you need to tell them if it's going to take more than 5 minutes, you need to tell them I need a day to think about it and discuss with my manager, and then I will get back to you about when I can deliver this. Something as simple as that will address a lot of the stressors that come up, because instead of relying on automatic internal responses of, some people will just say yes to everything, it is forcing the step back and to think strategically about what is going on. The communication overload. This is where standard operating procedures really shine. So the use of focus hours for parts of the day where you have no meetings or interruptions, making response time expectations explicit and holding extreme outliers accountable. So firms that say, okay, we expect a response within 1 business day, great. And then, people that respond longer than that, let's hold them accountable. And let's also hold the people who are insistent that you need to respond within 30 minutes, because who knows how they're actually getting their work done if they're responding to every email every 30 minutes or as soon as it comes in. Things like no vacation leave or after hours communications, and leaders have got to model good communication hygiene. So as an example, when I as a leader am working late, I schedule send all my emails for the following day. I do not send emails at 10 p.m. at night, because if I do that, somebody, even if we've talked about it, is going to have the expectation that, oh, I should respond immediately to that. And so no, I do not do that. Schedule send them for the next morning. This is easily available in all common email tools. Client education burden. Again, can you create some standard education documents that explain, okay, common questions, here's our process, here's how things work here. Again, what you're doing is you're putting things in place so people do not have to reinvent the wheel. And then the systemic inequities issue, which can absolutely cause retention challenges. So fairness in non-promotable work distribution. I have a separate video on non-promotable work. The title is pretty self-explanatory, but essentially it's work that needs to be done, but often is disproportionately weighted towards younger people, towards women if there are few on your team. I will drop a link to another explainer on that in the video description. Transparency and promotion paths is a big one around systemic inequities. So what do people need to do? What skills do they need to develop? What processes do they need to go through in order to get promoted? Typically, we find that when promotion paths are ambiguous, unclear, not transparently communicated, that leads to a perception, correct or not, that there is unfair treatment, and a perception of unfair treatment leads to burnout. And then finally, asking and providing what individuals need for support, not assuming. We know what they say about assuming. And so, people want to be treated as individuals. So ask people what they need for support rather than assuming everybody is going to be the same. Okay, so in summary, we need to address both the internal individual level stressors and the external stressors at the firm level. Now, this video was very much focused on the external stressors at the firm level. And if you want to think about this as a visual scale, you want this to be fairly even, right? If you're asking individuals to make sure they are incorporating things into their day to complete their stress cycle, if we are expecting them to come to work having done this on their own time, for example, we should be spending at least the same amount of time at work putting in place systems and processes to mitigate the predictable external stressors that are and how they show up in our workplace from the outside world. So I like to give very tangible challenges with all of my videos. And so my challenge to you is to have a team conversation, or even just have a conversation with your immediate supervisor about a simple SOP you could put in place to address some of these predictable stressors.